mentioned, or related to that, we should also address the fact that just to yesterday, on May 8th, in Florida, which was just recently had to deal with their own issue last year with Parkland shooting. And they did a year-long comprehensive review, which I've talked about before. And their decision was that part of the way to protect kids until they can get the answer of how to stop this in general is to go out and they're going to arm teachers. And I know that's been a big issue across the nation. It was a big issue here in New York State about whether or not we should arm teachers. Will that make teachers police and so forth? And I think that's a really silly argument. The silly argument was, well, if we arm teachers, they become police. Well, the red flag legislation that was passed turns teachers into spies because the teachers have to evaluate each and every child every single day. And based on their actions, that child's actions, the teachers have to figure out whether or not there's a firearm in the home. And then they have to go, and they are mandated to go over to the courts to present a legal action against that family because the potential presence of a firearm and or danger to the community that doesn't need to be established in a court of law and then have legal action taken against that family, that makes a teacher a spy for the government. Identify people who have firearms and then take them away. So the people who've argued, well, we don't want to turn teachers into police officers, you're turning them into spies if you pass a red flag legislation. You're not doing anyone a benefit. It's not resolving it. And more importantly, the bill doesn't arm every single teacher, the one in Florida. It arms those teachers who wish to be armed. And the governor, Ron DeSantis, signed the bill into law yesterday, May 8th, even as there was pressure from the anti-Second Amendment groups to veto a law that was passed by the state government. And we know, and this is all in reference to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High or Parkland, Florida shooting, which killed 17 students. Now, the thing that's really important about that is it's not something that just came out of the air. Like in New York, the red flag legislation, which had been around since 2015, floating around and no one would pass it because it was a really bad law. That just came out of nowhere, was pushed through in 6 months without any discussion. In fact, the lawmakers I spoke to, several of them who supported the bill either in part or in whole and voted for it, even though they knew and admitted, and I have published their discussion saying that they are flawed bills that have issues and problems and have legal consequences that are absolutely negative to the community and to individuals, even though they voted for it, then I have to say, in considering that, that came out of nowhere. That was passed out of nowhere. In Florida, we've seen that there was a study done that took an entire year, evaluated everything. The response time, how the response was reacted to, what are the potential benefits and detractions, and they evaluated that having armed resource officers in the school is a deterrent. Not only is it a deterrent, it is the fastest means of being able to stop an incident once it does occur. They're not presuming that getting rid of the guns is going to stop it. They're not presuming that having someone who is armed there is going to stop it, because it won't. What they're looking at is how do you mitigate the number of individuals who are wounded and killed if an incident starts. And having someone there sooner than later is one of the most critical things to save lives. The sooner you can have someone there with that second firearm, that good person trying to protect others, the sooner the incident stops and the fewer people who are injured. That is just the facts of it. And they determined in the Parkland, Florida study that there should be a number of school resource officers that are armed in the school based on the number of students in that school. In addition, and this is all from a study that was published in January of 2019. I've referenced it before. We will reference it again in the notes, in the links. But in addition to that, so Ron DeSantis has said that, for the schools that want, for the teachers that want to, that they are trained properly for this, they can go out and they can be armed to help in this protection of students. So let's understand, we don't have an answer to the first question, which is, what is making someone decide that the only answer in their lives is to go out and kill innocent people? That, I believe, is the question. And I mentioned it when I was talking over at Binghamton University. It's the number one thing. If we do not answer that, we cannot answer school shootings, mass shootings, any violence with guns. We can't answer that unless we answer that question. We cannot resolve this if we cannot answer that core, clear question. And it's not about the Second Amendment. It's not about whether someone thinks they'll be more or less free. It's not even about becoming Venezuela, which are all very important issues when dealing with the Second Amendment. But the reality is, we can't protect kids or our public and ourselves and our community if we can't answer that question. So in the meantime, until we get our politics right, until we get our nation right to be able to address that question, we have to protect ourselves. And one of the best ways to do that for our kids in schools is to go out and put armed resource officers and allow teachers who are trained and willing to do so to be able to be armed in those schools to protect them. That is the best answers we have. That is the reality. And that's why I believe Florida Governor DeSantis actually signed the bill, because it's of the options that are out there, it's the one that makes sense. Because you can tell me that we're going to have a red flag law, or we're going to have a gun ban, and I'm going to tell you that a criminal person or someone who is deranged doesn't care, and they're going to find a way. They'll use a car, they'll use a box cutter, they'll use a sword, a hammer, a baseball bat, they'll make bombs. They will find the means to go out there. They don't need a firearm to do this. And we have seen over and over again that they don't need the firearm to do this. They will find other means, illegal and some legal, to find or weaponize other implements to carry out their warped, demented criminal actions, which I denounce completely. See, I'm really not focused on the politics here, and I'm really not focused on who did it. We can point to all kinds of crazy people. Some do it because of, again, some are doing it for their religious fanaticism. Some are doing it just because they're evil people. Some people are mentally ill. Doesn't matter if they're trans. Doesn't matter if they like Trump or hate Trump. It doesn't matter if they vote Democrat or Republican. It really doesn't matter. Those are trivialities that are meant to distract you from the fact that, one, we are not addressing the root problem, and two, to give someone else a political boost. And if we look at it purely from that sense, that's the problem. I support the Second Amendment, not because I am a conservative Republican. That is a secondary issue. I'm a conservative Republican, period. The Second Amendment isn't about my politics. It's about our rights, our ability to protect ourselves, to protect each other, both from the government and from crazy, deranged individuals that would like to have a mass shooting event. Because we can't answer, why do they come to that conclusion that the only answer is to kill innocents? That's why I support the Second Amendment. That's the ultimate answer. Do I want to protect our nation from becoming Venezuela? Absolutely. But I also want to be able to protect myself, my friends, my family, my property from individuals who come to that conclusion, that somehow make the leap to think that the only answer is to kill innocents, which is always wrong. It is always wrong. It never will, whatever your underlying reason for doing that, let me say it very clearly, you will never get the resolution you want. It will never get you the answer. Killing innocents never answers anything. It won't. It never does. And it needs to be made very clear. I don't want to politicize any of these mass shootings, and I try not to. Yes, I am political, and yes, there is a political aspect to it, but the understanding is it will never, the reasoning is never for the politics. It's for the protection of each and every one of us, our communities, and that's what we need to get out there. Yes, I am upset with Democrats as they go and put out laws that take away from the Second Amendment because it prevents us from being able to defend ourselves while we avoid, sadly, in our politics, avoid trying to answer that underlying question. And that's what terrifies me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just the way I think about it. But, I want to commend Governor Ron DeSantis for being able to stand up in immense political pressure to pay attention to the actual research that was done on the Parkland shooting, to follow up on the recommendations of that, and to recognize that just taking away a gun does not protect anyone. And the only way to protect them in this environment at this time is to make sure that we have the resources available for those schools, for those students, to protect them. And that comes out of the Second Amendment. And he needs to be commended for that. He really does. And I want to also commend the students over at the STEM school. That's right, the Highlands Ranch High School. I want to commend them for standing up and saying, this shouldn't be political. This is about mental health. This is about how someone gets to that question. How do they get to the point where they're contemplating that the only answer is to kill innocents? And I commend them for that. I commend them for denouncing the media that makes this more all about the politics and not about the answer to the question or protection of those who need to be protected. I commend them about that. And I am sorry to hear about Kendrick Castillo having to give up his life, because that's a sad thing, especially at 18 years of age. And God bless him that he was such a hero to save unknown numbers of lives by his sacrifice. And we should consider that strongly. We have to remember that impressively. But I'm going to take a quick break.